Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson. We are located on the land of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee and the Southern Iroquois. My name is Leslie Vissage, and I am your worship associate today. Here at UUFC, we welcome all who come seeking a spiritual home among us, whether this is your 100th time here or your first. If you happen to be a first-time visitor, we would love to get to know you. If you are here in person, please be sure to visit the welcome table right outside the sanctuary and stay for conversation after the service during our social hour. If you are at home and are viewing us online, we would be happy for you to receive our newsletter so that you can learn more about us. Find us at uufc.org. And I would like to extend a special welcome to our visitors. If you would like, I invite you to stand as you are able and introduce yourselves. I don't know if we have any visitors today. I don't see any. So as far as announcements, the first thing I would like to say is a special thank you to Carl Dieter and Elaine Frendall. We had no volunteers for usher today, and they stepped up and filled that role for us. So a little appreciation for people who did it on the fly. On September 2nd, There will be a grounds work party. And yes, that's Labor Day weekend, but maybe it will be nice and not 95 degrees that day. So if you're around and enjoy working in the yards, please come out and help. On Sunday, September 10th, there will be a Socratic style dialogue experience. This will meet on the second and fourth Sundays of the month and will be presented by Cecil Huey and Alan Goldsmith. And if you look at the back of your order of service, there are quite a few more announcements. We don't have time to read them all, but I encourage you to read them at your leisure. Take it home with you so you can remember them. And just please come to as many as interest you and you are able. Now let us rise in body, mind, or spirit and sing together 123, Spirit of Life.
Good morning. Good morning. I am the Rev Holly Brown. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the newly called minister here at the UU Fellowship of Clemson. And I offer these opening words for us this morning. The flame of our chalice serves as a light on our path as we find our way together. Here, in this moment, we have become part of the living tradition, shaped by the past and searching for a future we do not yet know. We light our chalice each week to guide us on our journey and to carry it forth with us throughout the week. Come, let us worship together. Now I would like to invite one of our youth to come forward and help light the chalice. And I didn't get a chance to ask beforehand, but JB, would you be willing to help with lighting the chalice this morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. And as we light our chalice, we have our words of affirmation that I invite you to read along with me, and you can find those in your order of service. We gather together in the spirit of love, with justice as our guide. This is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. Thank you, JB.
Okay, I'm going to ask y'all to bear with me. We're going to do things a little bit differently this morning for our Time for All Ages. We have props, and those of you who I gave things to earlier, stand ready. In about 2 weeks, we will begin our regular religious exploration classes for our children and youth. And we will greet old friends, we will welcome our newcomers, we will talk about our summer adventures, and talk about all the fun things we're going to be doing in the coming months. But one of the most important things we do at the beginning of every year, every new year, is to create a new class covenant for each of our classes. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we talk about covenants a lot. We also write a lot of covenants. We have a covenant for the Board of Trustees. We have a staff covenant. We have our classroom covenants, and we as a congregation all together have a covenant. Even though we have all of these covenants, and we talk about them so much, we sometimes aren't always exactly sure what a covenant really is. Sometimes it seems like it might mean slightly different things to different people. I think if you ask them, most people would probably say something like, a covenant is an agreement we make with each other about how we will be together. Or a covenant is the rules we all agree to so that we can get along. As Unitarian Universalists, we value diversity, and we want to welcome all kinds of people with different talents, needs, ideas, and life experiences. But anyone who's ever been in a group of people knows that rules can be helpful. For example, if your family has a family game night, it is useful to have a rule about who gets to pick each week the game that you're going to play, so that no one's feeling gets hurt and it doesn't turn into a big fight and nobody has any fun. But covenant is more than just a list of rules, or a list of the values that we share, or the promises we make to one another. I like to think of a covenant as a way to help shape who we are as a group. Or, to put it another way, as the shape or outline of the space that all of us, with all of our wonderful differences, find a way to fit together. And the way we fit may change from time to time. And my volunteers, this is where I need you. Here's a little visual aid to help us think about it. How many of you are familiar with the game Tetris? Yep. Tetris is a game where you try to stack different shaped blocks together. It looks kind of like this finished wooden puzzle that I have here. And see, that's what happens sometimes. If I find all those pieces by the end of the day, I'll be doing good. So I would like to invite my volunteers. I have another one. It's okay, I have another one. So I'd like to invite my volunteers to come up one at a time. And I'd like to invite us to think about covenant as the frame of this other puzzle that has not hit the floor. Here. And I'm going to invite you to put your pieces in. And the pieces are all the different talents, needs, ideas, beliefs, etc. that we bring with us to this community. For example, go ahead, guys. One at a time. For example, a blue piece might represent someone who's a lifelong UU, while a green piece might be someone who has only just discovered this faith tradition. A red piece might represent those of us who identify as a humanist, while the white piece might be someone who identifies as a UU Christian. The purple piece might represent those who identify as part of the LGBT community, and so on. The shape of the pieces also affects how everything fits together. The square pieces could represent people in leadership positions. The lightning-shaped pieces might be those who volunteer for hospitality. The T-shaped pieces might be those of us who are neurodivergent, while the L-shaped pieces could be those of us with physical challenges. We could go on and on and on with all the different possibilities, but I think you get the idea. You may have noticed that just like in the game of Tetris, our volunteers may have had to move their piece around a bit to find a good place for it. They might have to flip it over, turn it this way or that. Thank you, Bing. The frame holds everything together, but there is space for moving things around and adding new pieces. Hey, Helen. Thank you, Helen. I think that our covenant, I like to think that our covenant with each other does kind of the same thing for us. It gives our community a framework within which we come together. And sometimes we have to shift the pieces around as we welcome newcomers, as our needs change over time, or as we find new ways of doing things. Sometimes it takes a few twists and turns to find the best fit until the next piece comes along.
This is the time we set aside for the offering in order to give towards the financial vitality of this community. Also, 25% of our weekly collection goes to an organization in the local community that we partner with. For the month of August, we are partnering with Habitat for Humanity. For those at home, you can go to the UUFC website and use the donate button. There you will see options for paying your pledge and donating towards organizations we partner with. We thank you for your generosity.
Thank you for the giving of these gifts this morning. During this time in the service, we move into sharing our joys and concerns. It is an opportunity for sacred sharing of ourselves with one another. Whether they are read aloud this morning or remain quiet and tender upon our hearts, know that they are held in this community. As I read each of the joys and concerns, I've asked Leslie to help by placing a stone in the shared vessel which represents this community of caring. Have a joy from Leslie that her husband, John, is recovering well from hip replacement surgery done on August 1st. See, from John Hoskins, Mike Cole, I think it says he still lives thanks to Jane. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And Sarah Summers Hoskins gives joy thanks to all of your support over the weekend, the activities, including Steve Afrigola's folk music, and Chief Nelson's presentation. Yes, yes. They were both so wonderful. Thank you. Yes. And have a concern from Dillman Baker Sorrells. I'm fine, but awaiting anxiously an evaluation by a neurosurgeon. And from Meg Williamson, I enjoyed a walk in Day's lovely woodland yesterday. From Mel and Steve, Mel wrote this last night to share with you this morning, a joy that the Oklahoma boys asked to thank all of you that attended and offered your support on Friday and Saturday nights. And you helped raise $180 for UUFC. Hope that you all had as much fun as we did. Thank you. All right. And Rebecca and Jeff share that Helen Lees Young is celebrating her 2nd birthday on Thursday. Yes. It's wonderful. Yes. And we have a note from JB that he had his first football game in Easley against the Green Waves. The results with Daniel 38 and Easley 16. Yes. And for these joys, we carry them with us in this community. And for those that have not been spoken aloud, or for those that are attending from home, we add one final stone. Have a meditation to share with you this morning called The Spark Between. Ask that you settle in and reflect on these words. There must be fuel, there must be a spark, and there must be oxygen. We have principles and ethics, the fuel of the fire that we would light. The spark is what passes between us, along with our aliveness, our possibility. Spirit moving in us is clear invitation, embossed, addressed, sealed with wax, tied with a ribbon. The spark is a seed of fire that must be treasured and tended, that it may bring the light. We have passion, the air without which nothing thrives, least of all the blaze. Our covenant, justice, and kindness. We would illuminate both who we are and what we do. All of these are an invitation to bring to life the blaze of liberation that is meant to light our way and to dispel the fog of cruelty and grief. It brings us instead to the hearth around which we gather to be nourished, energized, and warmed, and we get ready to glimpse the dispersed, enlivened. You are now invited, as we move into a beautiful piece of music that some members of the choir are going to help lead us all in singing. Number 1051, We Are, found in your Till hymnal. And you are welcome to stand or stay seated and continue in a spirit of meditation, whichever is most comfortable for you in this moment.
This is in the TL hymnal. For those of you who read music, there are a lot of repeats, a lot of repeats in that kind of music. So we're not doing any repeats. We read straight through from beginning to end. Please go ahead.
We Covenant by Janice Marie Johnson. Covenants are intentional. Covenants are audacious. Covenants are a promise that we can change our lives together in this faith. Together we will be stronger. Together we will be wiser. Together we will be gentler. We promise to recognize our uniqueness, to treasure our faith, to honor our neighbors with holiness. We covenant to be committed to each other, to consider each as significant, to consider each as valuable. We covenant to be invitational, to be accepting, to speak graceful truth, to forgive each other over and over again, and yes, to love. Our covenant stands firm. It is our embodiment of faith in each other. It is our blessing of each other. It is our commitment to each other. May we hold this commitment as a precious gift. May we hold our relationship as gifts that transcend borders. May we carry forth the intention of our covenant, the audacity of our covenant, the promise of our covenant, now and in years to come.
What does it mean to be part of a living tradition? As Unitarian Universalist, we live in a space, we leave space for our tradition to change with us. As we learn and grow, it too can learn and grow and change. Nothing is set in stone, not even our 7 principles and 6 sources. According to UU theologian James Luther Adams, who famously said, "Revelation is not sealed. Rather than saying this is the truth with a capital T, it invites us to say this is a little t truth based on what I know now in this moment. There is evidence of our evolution as a denomination, our transformation over the years. And you can see this in past versions of the principles and sources that have changed a few times since the merger between Unitarians and Universalists into a merged denomination in 1961. Some of that language removed sexist assumptions that mankind included everyone. And more recently, one of the sources was updated to represent all people, including non-binary individuals, from changing it from prophetic women and men to prophetic people, which also is more age inclusive of those in our denomination. The seventh principle, does anybody know when it was added? 94? There was some additions and changes in 94, but the seventh principle actually goes back to some ideas that formulated in the 1980s, providing deeper connection to our earth-centered traditions, acknowledging our interdependence with one another and with nature. And now UUs are considering passing the adoption of the eighth principle to be more intentionally anti-racist and accountable in building beloved community. And for anybody that's not aware, earlier this summer, this congregation adopted the eighth principle. And so I want to share those words again because it is important to move beyond just adopting it and saying, check, we did this. It's important to remember that it is a covenant that we actively live into. So the wording of the eighth principle states, quote, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." This is a beautiful example of how we learn and grow together and engage more deeply in our faith, recognizing that there is a need for accountability. And that's something that the eighth principle specifically calls us to in a way that none of the other principles thus far have. It calls us to deepen our covenant and promises to one another, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, UUs, and those that experience other forms of oppression, including ableism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, sexism, and many others that intersect with one another. The eight principles are part of a covenant that Unitarian Universalists across this country choose to affirm and promote together. We may not all agree on exactly what it says or the perfect wording of it, but there's a thread, an understanding of this is what our values mean. And they have the power to evolve yet again. Many of you may be aware that in 2020, there was a charge to the Article 2 Study Commission to do an evaluation of our current principles and purposes, which are housed in the UUA bylaws in the section of Article 2. And they did all kinds of cottage meeting discussions and surveys and evaluations of what they thought people were wanting to see happen, and more questions and more surveys and more feedback sessions. And then they presented a draft of potential changes earlier this year, and people then had the opportunity to look at it and decide whether they wanted to offer amendments to those words. And I believe this congregation submitted an amendment. Am I correct, Holly? Yes. So there was an opportunity for congregations like this one to send an amendment to our national gathering of General Assembly to have discussions about these proposed changes. And delegates from congregations just like this one had a chance to vote. This year, in July, past June, there was a vote to decide whether to move forward with the conversation, to continue the discussions, to incorporate the amendments that were passed. And then next year, there will be a vote as to whether to adopt the proposed changes. And this is kind of scary for some folks because you've known for so long the principles and purposes as they are written. But part of being a living tradition is recognizing that change, while uncomfortable, can be beneficial to us all. And I think that these changes have a potential. Has anybody here ever created a kind of elevator spiel, like a pitch to say what Unitarian Universalism is if you meet somebody that is not Unitarian Universalist? Okay. Well, for those of you that have, did any of you refer to our current 7 principles or 8 principles and 6 sources? There's a lot there, right? I know even as the minister, I'm not able to rattle off each one of those because I get them out of order. I don't have the wording exactly right. But I think the new proposal has a way for us to still have those values highlighted and encapsulated. I personally think I have a new elevator pitch. And this is what I would say based on the proposal, is that love is at the center of our faith. Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition that can grow and change with us. And this love is grounded in our principles and values of interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. Our faith honors many sources throughout our history of religious pluralism and through our lived experiences. I feel like that says so much about our faith in such a brief way that I could tell that to anybody that I meet. And there's a really cool graphic that looks kind of like a flower, although the discussion as to whether it should be teal or green or different colors has been prevalent enough that that might change. But each of those 6 words are represented on kind of flower petals with in the center a chalice that says love on it. And I want to lift up that our covenants are so much broader than what our principles and sources as they are currently written represent, because they are the promises that we make to one another, whether in groups or in classes, as Karen mentioned, and represented by our Tetris puzzle this morning. Covenants, one of the most key, most important things about covenant is that they are relational. They are about how we are interacting with one another, how we commit to one another. Are any of you familiar with this congregation's covenant of right relations? A few? Well, I wanted to highlight it this morning because I think sometimes we write stuff and it gets set aside. It's in the Google Drive. Some folks see it more regularly. But it might be important for us to think about it from time to time. So if you'll bear with me, I want to read what the Covenant of Right Relations for this congregation says currently. We come to fellowship in pursuit of a community of love, strength, and support that is larger than ourselves. In this spirit, we covenant to provide a safe and inclusive space for social and spiritual needs of our diverse members, honoring different perspectives, abilities, and cultural identities. To honor our obligation to volunteer as we are able and to give of ourselves in support of each other and the fellowship. To recognize, acknowledge, and appreciate our gifts to one another, accepting our imperfections and limitations. To support and nurture each other in our community, taking responsibility to ask for what we need. To listen and speak actively, respectfully, and with caring and open minds, sharing our individual truths as means to reach a better understanding. To speak honestly and directly to those with whom we have issues, especially in times of conflict or disagreement. To focus first and foremost on problem solving rather than blame, seeking the best solution for all involved, including our fellowship as a whole. We join in this covenant to grow and sustain a healthy and loving fellowship. Does that sound good to y'all? Does that make sense as a covenant? Yeah? I also want to name that all of these things are wonderful. All of our principles as you use are wonderful. But sometimes we have to think of them as aspirational because we don't always get it right or get it right the first time. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm human. I am a fallible being. I make mistakes. And I think we all do at some point in our lives. But the key about covenant, the key about it being relational, is that it provides us a framework, like the frame of the puzzle, for us to join one another in conversation and say something like, ouch, that hurt. Let's talk about it. Let's think about how we can be in relationship with one another moving forward. And I tell you what, sometimes it is hard to acknowledge when we make mistakes. But I'd rather be uncomfortable recognizing my mistake rather than making somebody else uncomfortable and turning them away from this faith, from this space that we are together. And with that kind of in mind, I also have been thinking a lot about how we say we want to have safe space. But do you all feel safe in every situation that you're ever in? No. Different spaces have a different level of safety involved, and depending on one's background, if there's trauma involved or if someone has a marginalized identity, safe space doesn't look exactly the same for each one of us. But striving for that is important. And so I've been rethinking about a poem that I shared in the newsletter this week, if anyone saw it, about brave space. It was originally part of a poem written by Beth Starno, and it lifts up this concern, this willingness to move into a brave space as we work to create a safe space, recognizing the complexities in that. I don't think we set out to make mistakes, but we do. We carry biases with us because of the cultures that we have been raised in, the things that we have been exposed to throughout our lives. We are part of white supremacist culture, whether we are white or not. We have been raised in a culture that tells us certain things about people with a variety of different identities. And we are swimming in those waters, all of us. And we have to be aware of that because our background, we might say something or do something that we didn't even realize was problematic until somebody says, hey, that's not okay. And again, it can be hard. So some of you have heard me say that before I became a minister, I worked in history museums. I worked in museums that focused on the Revolutionary War, the Victorian era, and the Civil War. And there were narratives that we shared in the museum setting that I look back at and I'm like, oh, why? Because each of us has different stories. And if the stories are told from a dominant white supremacist narrative of the origins of this country, we are perpetuating horrible, harmful myths. And yesterday, when Chief Nelson was talking, he said he spoke to someone that had this idea that the indigenous people, the Native Americans that lived here in this country, were the ones that raped and pillaged and killed Europeans when they settled here, when quite the opposite is true. But these are part of the narratives that we have been taught over time. But if you think about your life here and now, if, for instance, you have ever been a witness to a car accident, do you think your perspective as somebody across the highway is the same as somebody in the car right behind the accident or a person in the car during the accident? Because whether you are hurt, whether you or your family has been put in peril is going to make a difference. But all of those are part of the truth when they are put together. Because there is no one capital T truth. There are many truths that we make sense and meaning of together. But just because our truths aren't all the same, it doesn't negate one person's experience, because it is at the intersection of those stories that we can find deeper meaning and understanding. But as Chief Nelson said yesterday, sometimes you're so far apart that you don't want to try to argue with someone. And one of the beauties of this faith, one of the beauties of this covenant that we share, is that it provides a way, a space, a framework for us to call one another back into covenant. and often have those mistakes pointed out from a place of love. But it is not something that we do once and are done with it. It's something that we have to do over and over again as we continue to work to get it right. Highlighting the promises that we make to one another as we do the work of ministry, as we get to know one another as your new minister here in these spaces. It is about exploring our hopes and our dreams for the future of shared ministry here in this fellowship, that we will continue to be in conversations about those covenants that we share in the variety of different spaces. And the path before us will not always be easy, but may it be lit by our chalice, shining the light of our faith upon our path in our journey, so that we can call one another back. Because this work, this ministry, is too important for us to walk away, for us to move outside of this community. Because ministry and the future of the congregation are bound inextricably to one another through our covenants. May the covenants that we share, the promises we make, hold us in community and guide our actions with one another and with the wider community. May it be so. May we make it so. And blessed be. If you'll rise in body or in spirit wherever you are to join in singing our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Our closing words this morning are from bell hooks. Quote, "For me, forgiveness and compassion are always linked. We do not hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed." End quote. May we find ourselves in our relationships to be transformed through covenant. May we carry the transformative power of this faith with us until we are together again. Go in peace and return in love.